I wanted to do a video about this song from the Disney movie Encanto. It's a beautiful movie, and I enjoy this song. It's very botanical, and so I thought I might share some of what I was inspired by watching this video. This is a song about the character Isabela on the left, and she has a magic power where she can manifest flowers where she goes. And she's been sort of constrained by her family and what she thinks they expect of her to make things that are conventionally beautiful. And so you can see even in the background of this, there's a lot of this purple, lavender, pink kind of color scheme. I think that's a signal to being kind of limited. So there's going to be a whole lot of plants that arise that have different colors. The whole song gets more colorful as we go. And we also watch the character kind of develop and become a person who gets more in touch with what she can do, which is also more about what she wants to do. So she's discovering her own desires as well as discovering some powers. So the whole thing is set into motion in this moment where she kind of allows herself to be honest with her sister Mirabel on the right. And in the moment of kind of tapping into some frustration, she manifests this cactus plant. It just pops up out of the ground. She's been making roses for most of her life, roses and conventionally beautiful flowers. And this little spiky cactus appears and she says, "What is this?" And so this is the start for the song. What else can I do? So if I can do this, if I can feel in a different way, what else am I capable of? So most of the video, I just want to show you the plants that arise, the ones they sing about and mention, and kind of tie in with how those are kind of connected to the story. And maybe you're just curious as to what kind of plants are being shown here. So I'll start you off with the cactus here, which of course is the kind of the starting point for the whole song. She's curious, she says, "What is this? It's prickly." Again, kind of upsetting this idea of conventional beauty. So I'm a botanist and I love plants of all stripes, the prickly ones, the poisonous ones, the misshapen ones. They're all kind of cool to me. But I think a lot of people, when they're first introduced to plants, they have this idea of more of the supermarket rose kind of variety. So this is a nice depiction of a cactus. This is one you might call a barrel cactus. Cactus are almost all lacking leaves, true leaves. So in place of their leaves, they have these spines and they're clustered along the stem. And it's the stem actually that is green and photosynthetic. So that's a strategy to let them do photosynthesis without losing a lot of water. They can have thick skin, and leaves are kind of a water liability. So without having leaves, they can save their water inside of the plant body. And the spines are a way of preventing animals from coming to take the water away from them by eating them. They're also very, I appreciate that the cactus is botanically accurate here. So we have also a correct botanical depiction of a cactus flower. I don't know that I got every species just right on these, but I want to show you some real images of plants that could be the kinds of plants that were inspiring the depictions on here. So I have links to the photographs. These are open source photographs taken largely from this platform iNaturalist. So people have gone out with their cameras and photographed nature as they find it, and also identified them. So this matches up in a few ways. We've got similar shape to the round stem here, similar clusters of spines. Again, pretty classical, pretty typical cactus form. And then the cactus flower is made up of lots and lots of these petals, and petals, kind of just a whole bunch of them clustered together. So this is not something you find in every kind of flower, to have so many petals together, but that's characteristic of the cactus, and even managed to get an image where the color lines up pretty well. So we're seeing in the image from the song, we're seeing this from the side, and then this image, most of them are down from the top. Lots of these little organs in here are the anthers that are producing and distributing pollen. So lots and lots of pollen distributing organs inside of the cactus flowers. So as the song goes, she touches this, discovers that it's prickly, and she's kind of intrigued by that as something that she's, discovering a new form of beauty, I think. And as she touches it, it grows bigger into more shapes. So we've got the original stem here and then a couple other stem segments. This is something that sometimes occurs in cactuses. I didn't find too many images of barrel cactuses doing that, but certainly a possibility in a cactus to grow basically another unit of stem off to the side somewhere. Another thing that I thought was kind of neat and also botanically accurate, she managed to pick this plant up and hold it. Kind of ties in with something about cactus that a lot of cactus don't have very deep root systems. So if they're growing in the desert and the soil doesn't have a lot of water, a lot of cactus are in a position of grabbing water at rare, infrequent events. So when it rains, they kind of grab it from the surface layer, which means that their roots are kind of shallow. So this is something you could do if you have a cactus at home. You might have noticed your cactus after a certain size might even fall over. So not necessarily something you'd have to really dig out from the roots to get the whole cactus. All right, so we got the process going with our cactus here. Moving on to some other flowers. So at this point, she's entering into the meat of the song. And she talks about how she's been through her life kind of asked to produce a lot of these roses. So I make rows and rows of roses. And sure enough, we have a lot of roses in here. And I'd like to point out what my perspective on the roses is, that they are, they're kind of this floral variety, a florist variety. So when you go and you buy roses, you typically get something that's got a whole lot of petals. So this is a mutated version, actually. This is something that people have selected over time to be what a lot of people see as a nice, beautiful version of a rose flower. It has lots of petals, and it's a mutant. It's actually not something that would be very adaptive out in nature, because what happens with the cultivated roses shown on the bottom here is that they basically converted their reproductive organs, shown at the top here. Normally they have lots and lots of stamens, lots and lots of carpels, male and female reproductive organs. They sort of convert those into the petals. And so we have lots of petals. This is something people typically like about flowers, is lots of petals, not so much of this grainy stamen structure and so on. So this is kind of beautiful to people, or we've decided over time this is something we like. I'll say majority of people like this kind of flower. But this is really the natural version of a rose. So simply 5 petals, and naturally benefiting the plant has a lot more emphasis on reproduction. So producing and distributing pollen with these outer stamen organs, and then collecting pollen with the carpels toward the inside of the flower. So it's kind of a sign of something that's a little bit unnatural, I think, in this song, where she's been asked to produce this thing that makes other people happy, but isn't really authentic. And so that kind of ties in with her character. And then she's singing here. We don't really have an illustration of this next one, as far as I can tell. The lyric is Flor de Mayo by the mile. And Flor de Mayo is, it translates to May flower, so the month of May. And this is a term that's used quite often across a wide variety of plants, sort of depending where you are in the world. Plants that bloom in May can be called May flowers. We have different May flowers depending on where you are. Even the tropical version of Mayflower is sometimes a different plant entirely. But relative to the country of Colombia, where this story is set, this is the national flower of Colombia, which is Flor de Mayo, and their version of Flor de Mayo is an orchid. So this is the species Cattleya triani in the orchid family. Lovely plant. I didn't really see a depiction of this in the song as far as I can tell, but this is maybe what she's singing about being asked to produce. Moving on, we get into plants that are kind of aggressive. So again, I think if you love plants for their own sake, you might enjoy plants that are kind of more equipped to be aggressive or dangerous. And so this one, she mentions the name Strangling Figs. And really nice depiction here. This is Mirabelle being hoisted up on this strangling fig. What's shown here is kind of an interlacing structure of stems on a fig plant. Figs, there are fig plants in this genus Ficus, lots of different species distributed throughout the world, largely in the tropics. And one thing that figs have as sort of a specialty is that if their stems meet, if you've got a collection of fig stems, you can kind of braid them together. And more than a lot of trees, they're sort of okay with growing their barks together. So you end up having a pattern like this where you can maybe have them interlace. They started out separate, but then they kind of grow together. So this term strangling fig, this is a term that I'm more familiar with from Eurasia, plants that can sort of grow around other plants. So strangling figs grow on the outside of another plant, and they can kind of outcompete the plant that they're growing around. So a little bit by virtue of this being able to grow themselves together, sometimes they sort of grow themselves together around another plant and choke it out. So that's the name strangling fig here. So again, kind of an aggressive plant, and one that might not be as conventionally beautiful, certainly not big in the colorful flowers department. As far as strangling figs, I was trying to look up plants that are more local to the story, Colombia. And this is one. So I mentioned that plants in the genus Ficus are found throughout the tropics, including tropical South America. This is a species that came up as sometimes being called strangling figs. And you can see this structure where they're dropping these roots down from the branches and they grow together, and you can kind of see lots of different pieces have grown together. Potentially that could be the kind of growth that outcompetes another plant and strangles it out. Another follow-up to this verse, the verse is strangling fig, hanging vines. I didn't think it was useful really to illustrate anything viney. There's a whole bunch of vines in the world. Vines are a major component of rainforests. So picture a vine, there's a whole bunch of them out there. They're not really shown too much in this song as well. Another song, lyric Jacaranda, Hurricane of Jacaranda. And Jacaranda is a genus. So this is a scientific name for a group of plants in the family Bignoniaceae. And they are ornamental plants. Some are cultivated. They have big showy displays of flowers. And so I think that's probably something that would be memorable to people who are familiar with Colombia. And the origin of this word, so it's a genus name, it's part of the official scientific name of the jacaranda. And the origin, the internet tells me, was from the native communities of that area, describing the fragrant smell of this plant. So lots of, not too large flowers, but lots of them in lovely lavender color for the jacaranda. Another one that follows up with that is Palma de Serra. And this is a Spanish name. Palma de Serra translates into English as wax palm. This is a plant that people can get wax from the stem to make candles from. And so oils and so on. This is something that you can sometimes get from plants in a way to help yourself out, making something like a candle. So in this scene, Isabela is sort of rising on a palm tree as it's going up to the sky. It's made a little stage here. Naturally, there'd be probably lots of young leaves developing in this region, not so much of a platform in an actual palm tree, but for the sake of the song, she's got a nice singing platform here. And her sister's trying to catch up on the right there. So Palma de Serra doesn't quite look like the depiction. I guess it's up for debate how much it looks like the actual Palma de Serra. So this is a type of palm we often see in the tropics. Lots of different palm trees, and this is their growth form that we often see is a very skinny stem, and then branching out at the top, or I shouldn't say branching, but the leaves produced toward the top of this plant. And you can see the one kind of centrally here, and then quite a few of these toward the background. Long, skinny palms. This is a feature that's not uncommon in a variety of palm species in that part of the world. Once she gets into the light a little bit more, she's cast this vine here that's got these little glistening things along it. The lyrics describe them as sundew, and certainly they look like sundew plants. As far as botanically, the sundew plants, this would be a whole lot of individual sundew plants. So one of these little clusters would be its own plant. And as part of the song, the scale's a little bit off. So sundew plants, not this large for sure. The largest sundew plant still about the size of your hand. So this is an image I got from iNaturalist showing a sundew plant that can be found in Colombia. And these are the photographer's fingertips there showing you the scale of this plant. So a really small plant. The lyric also reminds us that this is a carnivorous plant, and sure enough, it is. So the sundew gives its name, or gets its name from having this kind of glistening, sugary secretion on the end of these hairs, and that's an attractant for insects, but it's also part of the trap. So the hairs have this glistening, sugary liquid on the end. The sugary content there is an attraction, but the stickiness ends up being the demise of these insects that come visiting. So very small insects, typically, they get stuck in the hairs and the stickiness. And then over time, these leaves can actually kind of fold up in and envelop the insect. So the plant senses that it's got an insect on there, and it rolls its leaf up and finishes trapping the insect and basically digests it, by putting digestive enzymes out and kind of externally digesting the insect. This plant is carnivorous because it typically grows in areas that are low in nutrients, especially something like nitrogen. So they are able to grow in these low nutrient soils because they supplement their nutrients by eating animals. So a couple things, there's a little bit of artistic license on the sundews that are shown in the song. Of course, they're much larger. They're also a lot more active. There's a part where Mirabel gets a little too close to one and starts kind of snapping at her. That is not how they capture their prey. So they wouldn't capture anything as large as a person or even a part of a person. And they don't work in that scale. So it's one leaf at a time would sense that it has an insect on there and kind of roll up much slower than is shown here. But of course, as part of the song, this is a nice illustration of the potential of these plants to be a little bit dangerous. I'd say people in movies, people who make movies, they get fascinated by carnivorous plants. Not really any carnivorous plants out there that would eat a person. They're much more designed to take on smaller animals, but cool for the song anyway. So as the song goes, Isabela starts manifesting plants farther and farther away from the center. They started out at the house, and the plants start filling the town and taking on, as I mentioned earlier, lots of different colors. So we've got some purples and reds and yellows coming in, and a few of these, there's a lot of plants in this. I don't know that I can go over every plant species. Feel free to let me know if you flag anything in here that looks like an interesting plant to talk about. They're jumping off the roof of the house and heading out into the country where they've filled the land, or where she's filled the land with these different plants. In this zone, one plant jumps out at me, these spiky plants. This is a succulent plant, and could be one of a whole lot of different kinds of plants. Could be like a yucca or an agave. These are related plants. They're good at surviving in dry conditions. And I just happened to pick one here to kind of illustrate a natural form of this. The purple color, I don't know if that's quite, there's a few species that may be drifting towards purple. Couldn't find any good images to work with on that one though. So we'll stick with this one for now. Agave, this is something that wouldn't be out of place in Colombia. Colombia in the tropics of South America has some areas that are wet, sort of rainforesty, also has some desert type of areas, also some Andean mountains areas. So lots of different types of habitats where these different plants can grow. So dry weather plants, wet rainforest plants, a few of each are represented in the song. So panning out again, a little bit better depiction here, I think, of like a Palma de Serra, one of these palm trees, again, with the skinny trunks and the leaves clustered toward the top. And then probably that agave plant here. And then this kind of plant, this is a little bit, again, of artistic license. There's some of that vine that features throughout the song. And this, so the vine isn't really a natural component of what she's holding on to at the tip there. The termination of this vine is in a plant that looks a whole lot like a bromeliad. I think that's probably the inspiration for this. And that would be the reproductive part of a bromeliad. So as you can see with this image, the leaves of the bromeliad in natural form They're all clustered at a single location. This is a plant that often can grow as an epiphyte, which is a plant that grows on other plants. And it's got these leaves that help to channel the water toward the base. So sometimes these are called tank bromeliads. They channel the water toward the base. They actually store water, which is a really good strategy if you're growing away from the ground. So they grow up on a tree, they collect and store their own water, and that gives them a source of water, even though they don't have the wet ground to draw water from. So those are their leaves for photosynthesis. And then when it's time to do reproduction with flowers, this is the flowering structure. These are leaves also, the red ones, but they're leaves associated with the reproduction. So I would call those more bracts. They're colorful, they help with attracting animal pollinators to come visit those flowers. And this one's red. It could potentially grow out longer, a little bit like what they're showing here, but not as long as a whole vine. But then at the tip here, you can see the colorful bracts, probably very much like what's shown here. And of course, they're using it like a microphone, so sure, why not? All right, so this is just one example of a bromeliad, a very diverse group. This is one that looked to me a lot like the kind that they're showing here. This part I kind of enjoyed. So while they're up on the rooftop and they've experienced the bromeliad a little bit, there's a scene where she kind of knocks one. Still seems to be inspired by a bromeliad. Again, a lot of artistic license there. Look like there's some extra leaves along the way. But the scene here, it starts getting into a part of the song where there's this colorful, dusty powder going around. And again, nice component to have in the song. It allows her to discover that she can wear different colors than this conventional pink she's been dressed in most of her life. And so colorful dust is sort of part of the song, but it's also, I think it's trying to call up pollen. So if you have a plant that is more often a plant that's wind pollinated would have this abundance of pollen. So if you shake for example, a pine tree at a certain time of year, you can get these big clouds of pollen to come out. Not something I would expect from a bromeliad like this. These are animal pollinated flowers, and as such, they would probably hold on to their pollen rather than just pushing them out in clouds into the environment. But at least it's kind of the first discovery of pollen coming from these flowers. I think it's nice to have that biologically accurate. This is a very typical color for pollen, this yellow color getting sprayed upon her. So not too far off from what you could really get from a flower, maybe just not this kind of flower. There's another lyric that describes the plant Tabebuya, coming through with Tabebuya. This is a plant that might be familiar to people in Colombia. This is how it's depicted. And over here I have something I grabbed from Wikipedia. Tabebuya is, again, another genus name. And this has an origin, again, in the native language of people native to that region, referring to ant wood. I don't know the details about that one. But it is another interesting plant. This is just like jacaranda. This is one in the same family, Bignoniaceae, which is a pretty diverse family of plants in the tropics. And they've got some interesting fruits. So I thought I'd mention those. As the fruits develop, they are capsules and they burst open. And so this is the wall of the fruit that's being shown here, kind of curvy and dried out. It's burst open, and it bursts open to reveal this kind of ranked arrangement of seeds. And these seeds have broad, papery scales to go with them, and that allows them to disperse in the wind. So kind of an attractive structure for getting these plants around. Tabebuya. Another thing that kind of came to mind, it's shown up really nicely in this image. At least one of the flowers that's in Isabela's hair seems to be an orchid. This is a common orchid color. Sometimes this is even referred to as a color known as orchid. Feature of orchid is, well, they have a very diverse set of flowers in the orchid family, but this is one type of flower. I grabbed this one. This is a plant from Mexico, and they have 6 parts to their flower, sort of 3 behind and 3 in front. And the characteristic of the orchid is that this central, one of these petals is modified into a much different shape, color, size, what have you, depending on the species. much different from the rest. So this one kind of stands out against the other 5, similar to what's shown in her hair. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then probably one behind. And then there's this bigger, rounder petal kind of bottom center for that one. So I'd say good chance that's an orchid in her hair. And then maybe inspired by something like what I'm showing here, but lots of orchids to choose from. And maybe you know a little more precisely what exactly that orchid is. Lots of people are familiar with orchids. A little bit towards the end here, we have, again, manifesting flowers all throughout the town. This is a cluster of plants that come up under this gentleman with the donkey cart. And a few of them we've seen. We've got the cactus again, just in different shades here, purples and oranges. This is probably another agave or something like that in the background. The one over here, this is a almost certainly Sansevieria. So you probably know this as Sansevieria, the dragon plants, dragon tongue, something like that. And has these lighter colored pigmentation along the edges of the leaves. These very thick leaves, leathery and tough. This is a plant that can handle dry conditions. And it's actually native to Africa, but commonly planted in South America. So you probably would run into this in Colombia. Just wasn't there originally before people started sailing across the oceans. So traditionally genus Sansevieria, and depending on who you talk to, potentially in this genus Dracaena these days. And then another one in the background is a little bit different kind of, I think, plant in the same family as the agave. And this probably easiest to call an illustration of, to compare this to a plant that might be familiar to you in North America, the Joshua tree plant. It's actually a sort of a tree form of one of these yucca plants. So culminates in, the branches culminate in the green spiky leaves. This is the flowers being produced in the inflorescence. And then same with what's shown on the picture down in this region. This is a lot of dead leaves. So the dead leaves stick around and they kind of make up this bushy feature under the part that's really more the active growing and functioning part of the plant at that point. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to share your comments, I'd be curious to know if other people have other inspiration about plants in this song or just in general. Hope you enjoyed it.